The current interface to the family's functionality here is principally through this really wonderful family selection window, and I'm hoping that this will stay very much like it is in the new version, because it's really quite wonderful. I remember when I asked for this, I had some ideas, and what was created was beyond my expectations for this. So it's very, very nice. And the graphics interface will be an alternative to this, so that there's both this text-based, outline-based orientation to the families and the graphic interface. Here with the remedy selected, the breakdown in the kingdoms is just those groups to which this remedy belongs, and here with the remedy not selected is the full tree, in which you can pick any single or combination of families to limit or in an analysis or highlight in an analysis. So the first screen in the graphic interface will be this one, which is an orientation to the various kingdoms of substances. So, and we've set this up in a spiral from least complex or maybe evolutionary into higher life forms. So starting with imponderables to minerals and viruses, the Monera, the bacteria, nosodes, plants, fungi, and animals. And we've tried to be very true to contemporary taxonomic classification here. So although homeopaths are used to including the fungi as a plant, this is not an accurate representation at all. In fact, fungi are more closely related to the animals than they are to plants. So we've, while keeping the names and groups that users are used to, we've tried to be very more true to contemporary classification schemes. And we've made a few concessions, as you'll see in just a little bit. Now the way this is accessed is through the little family icon here, main groups. This is the entry diagram to the plants illustrations. So the main plant groups, from green algae and the bryophytes on up through the more evolutionary advanced plants here, the rosids and the asterids. And again, clicking on any of these groups will drill you down further into the family tree. You'll see that the fungi are not on here because they're treated separately, as they should be taxonomically. So this is how it would look in the currently in the on the page that will come up with the footer. Here you can click in any of the bubbles on the diagram or in any of these arcs. For example, within the monocots, most users would be interested in the Liliales / Asparagales complex. So we've put that in a bubble to click directly to. But the monocots are a larger group, and there's a few remedies that are monocots but not in this group. So we've hooked up this arc so that you can click here and come down to the next level illustration of monocots broken down further, or into the Liliales / Asparagales specifically and go down to the next level. This illustration I've gotten to by clicking here in this non-specified core eudicots, so anywhere within this arc outside of one of these major groups. Okay. So this is set up so if you click anywhere within this arc, you'll go to the unspecified page unless it's within one of these bubbles. You go more specifically to those. So here are the unclassified core eudicots, for example, the next layer down. And if we click on the Carophilales, we'll go to the next illustration down here, which is the order Carophilales broken down into now botanical families. And one of the things I've done here is I've really included all of the described botanical families. Currently, the schemes that a lot of teachers are using, where they'll assign a particular theme to a family or keywords to a family, have recognized only a small number of botanical families. For example, in Sankaran's scheme, there I believe are only 30 or 33 botanical groups mentioned, family groups mentioned, where there are over 440 botanical families that have been described by botanists. So I've put all of the various families in here, but those in which are populated by remedies I've included in bubbles here. And I've also included some intermediate bubbles for groups that a lot of users might want to wish to take together. For example, it would be very common to want to look at the Phytolacacea along with the Nyctangiaceae, and so I've put an intermediate bubble here so that a user could click and get both of these groups considered at once. They can also select the two bubbles and restrict to those two, but we've just made it easy by giving them an intermediate spot to link from. All of these families that don't have bubbles currently aren't populated by remedies, so there's no options when you click on those. So these illustrations originally, where I've taken all this data from is from the APG2 classification scheme, which is the most contemporary classification scheme based on DNA analysis of plants, rather than the older classification schemes based on flower shape and petiole shape and so on that imply relationship. The APG2 scheme, by looking at DNA analysis, is much more accurate in assessing phylogenetic relationships between plants. And these were basic angular tree diagrams, and I've just put them into this form that's more built around spirals, which I think is more aesthetic and looks more like how homeopaths like to think of plants with these kinds of forms. The other is that by doing this, we're able to get a lot more information on a single page than if we used a tree diagram where everything is off to the right. So in looking at how to get a very complex botanical order like this onto one page, this worked out much better than the original scheme I was working off of. Here's the asparagales, worked similarly. What I've done for each group here is picked one of, usually the best represented member of each group in our Materia Medica to do an illustration. So among the asparagales, Iris versicolor is the most well-known homeopathic remedy within this group in terms of how much information there is in our Materia Medica. So I've done an Iris versicolor for this. And I've tried on most of these to use either line diagrams or very simple botanical illustrations that could be washed out and used for background images. On the main plants diagram, going back to this one, I used cinchona being the first remedy introduced by Hahnemann, his Eureka experience, thinking that was very appropriate for describing the plants. So here's how, again, how this asparagales image would look in the window that would pop up with the footer here. And again, we've talked about changing this around a little bit. The right click here on Iridacea would bring up this pop-up menu, which allows us to display the subcategory, go down deeper into the set of illustrations, or highlight the family in the analysis, or limit the analysis to this family, or go to this family in the family's repertory. And then another link you've added to this has been find this family, search this family in the Wikipedia. And so actually go online and pull up the information about this family. And I think that's important because within our program, we can include those members of this family that have been described homeopathically and medicinally, but often there are many, many more members of these families of plants that have not come to our attention as homeopaths. And this gives the user who's interested in that a way of going out and looking through the Wikipedia, which is actually an excellent botanical resource these days, really superb information in there. And looking and saying, okay, what else is it within the Iridacea? And it allows us to use these external sources so that we don't have to put all that material into this product.